A millionaire invites a hungry street boy to a luxurious party, but his cruel games take an unexpected turn when an elderly guest recognizes something familiar about the child. What happens next will change both their lives forever and expose a decades-old secret that shakes Boston's elite to its core. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. The January wind cut through Tommy Carter's thin jacket like it wasn't even there. At 12 years old, he had mastered the art of looking invisible while hunting for his next meal behind Boston's most expensive restaurants. Tonight, he kept his eyes fixed on the back door of Lou Blanc, watching steam rise from the kitchen vents and carrying with it the tantalizing aroma of truffle-infused something or other. He didn't know the fancy names, but his stomach growled all the same. The dumpster diving had become a science. Wait until the kitchen staff took their smoke break at 8:45 p.m., then move fast. Sometimes, if he was lucky, they'd throw out perfectly good food just because some wealthy customer complained it wasn't exactly right. Tommy had learned that rich people could be incredibly picky about their food, a concept that seemed absurd to someone who considered day-old bread a feast. As he crouched behind a stack of empty wine crates, memories of his last foster home flickered through his mind. The Petersons had been nice enough, at least compared to some others, but they couldn't handle a troubled child, as the social worker had labeled him. Troubled. The word still stung. All he'd done was steal food from their pantry to give to a hungry kid at school. 6 homes in 3 years, each one hoping for a perfect child, each one sending him back when they realized he wasn't it. The kitchen door swung open, releasing a burst of warm air and voices. But instead of the usual kitchen staff, a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. Tommy instinctively pressed himself deeper into the shadows. "Yes, everything's set for tomorrow night's party," the man said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came with never having to worry about your next meal. "Trust me, it'll be an evening no one will forget." Tommy held his breath as the man turned in his direction. In the dim light of the alley, their eyes met. Instead of showing anger or disgust, the man's face curved into an unexpected smile. He ended his call and took a step toward Tommy's hiding spot. "Hey there, young man. No need to hide." His voice was smooth as honey, but something in it made Tommy's spine tingle. "I'm Richard Blake. And unless I'm mistaken, you look like someone who could use a good meal." Tommy said nothing, years of street survival screaming at him to run. But Blake pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope from his jacket. "I'm hosting a party tomorrow night. Very exclusive. The best food you can imagine." He held out the envelope. "Consider yourself invited. Who knows? It might just change your life." Tommy's hand trembled as he reached for the envelope. Before he could think better of it, Blake had pressed it into his palm and turned away, disappearing back through the kitchen door with a final glance that Tommy couldn't quite read. In the yellow glow of the nearest streetlight, Tommy opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation with an address in the city's most expensive district, along with a time, 7 p.m. His stomach growled again, louder this time, drowning out the warning bells in his head. After all, how bad could a party be? Tommy stood at the base of the Millennium Tower, clutching the cream-colored invitation like a shield. The building seemed to pierce the clouds themselves, its glass surface reflecting the setting sun in shades of orange and gold. He'd passed this building countless times before, but always as a shadow, someone the well-dressed people hurrying in and out pretended not to see. Tonight was different. He'd spent the morning scrubbing himself clean in a McDonald's bathroom and borrowed, he refused to think of it as stealing, a slightly worn dress shirt and pants from a church donation bin. The clothes were too big, but he'd managed to make them presentable by rolling up the sleeves and using a discarded shoelace as a belt. The doorman's eyes narrowed as Tommy approached, but the invitation did its magic. "Mr. Blake's party, I assume?" The man's tone suggested he'd rather remove Tommy from the premises, but orders were orders. "Elevator to the penthouse. Don't touch anything you don't have to." The elevator was bigger than the last room he'd had at the foster home. Tommy watched the numbers climb, 10, 20, 30, each floor taking him further from the world he knew. His reflection in the mirrored walls showed a boy trying desperately to look like he belonged. He straightened his shoulders, remembering what his first foster mother had said about confidence being half the battle. The elevator doors opened directly into what looked like a scene from a movie. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across marble floors. Men in tuxedos and women in flowing gowns mingled, their laughter tinkling like the champagne glasses they held. The view through the floor-to-ceiling windows showed Boston spread out below like a carpet of lights. "Ah, our guest of honor has arrived." Blake's voice carried across the room and conversation stuttered to a halt. All eyes turned to Tommy and he felt his face burn. Blake approached, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Everyone, this is the young man I told you about. Tommy, welcome to my humble home." A few guests tittered at the word humble. Tommy sensed something off in their amusement, but Blake was already steering him toward a long table laden with food. "You must be hungry. Please help yourself." Tommy had never seen so much food in one place. Platters of tiny elegant things he couldn't name sat alongside towers of seafood and cuts of meat that made his mouth water. His stomach clenched painfully, reminding him why he'd come. As he reached for a small pastry, a gentle voice spoke behind him. "Try the crab cakes. They're excellent." Tommy turned to find an older man watching him with kind eyes that seemed out of place among the calculating stares around them. His silver hair and distinguished bearing commanded respect, but there was something else in his expression, something that made Tommy feel, for the first time that evening, like a human being rather than an exhibit. "I'm James Wilson," the man said quietly, helping himself to a crab cake as if to demonstrate it was safe. "Former federal judge, current party wallflower." His smile held a hint of sadness that vanished so quickly Tommy thought he might have imagined it. Before Tommy could respond, Blake's voice rang out again. "Ladies and gentlemen, now that everyone's here, let the evening's entertainment begin." The way he emphasized entertainment sent a chill down Tommy's spine. Several guests moved to form a loose circle, their expressions ranging from anticipation to barely concealed cruelty. Tommy felt James Wilson tense beside him. The old judge's hand twitched as if he wanted to reach out, but remained at his side. The room suddenly felt colder despite the warmth of so many bodies, and Tommy realized with growing dread that the food had been just the beginning, a prelude to something else entirely. Blake raised his crystal glass. "Tommy, my boy, are you ready to earn your supper?" "Earn my supper?" Tommy's voice came out smaller than he intended, drawing smirks from several guests. The pastry he just picked up suddenly felt heavy in his hand. Blake's smile widened. "Of course. You didn't think this was just charity, did you?" He gestured expansively at the gathered crowd. "My friends and I, we believe in teaching valuable life lessons. Everything has a price, Tommy. The question is, are you willing to pay it?" The circle of guests tightened, and Tommy noticed how they positioned themselves between him and the elevator. The food he'd eaten turned to lead in his stomach. James Wilson had drifted to the edge of the circle, his face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. "First lesson," Blake announced, plucking the pastry from Tommy's hand and popping it into his own mouth. "Nothing in life is free. But I'm a generous man. For each task you complete, you'll earn a portion of this magnificent feast. Fail and well?" He shrugged elegantly. "There's always the dumpster behind Lou Blanc, isn't there?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. A woman in a red dress that sparkled like fresh blood stepped forward. "Make him dance for us, Richard. The little street rat probably doesn't even know how." "An excellent suggestion, Victoria." Blake clapped his hands. "Tommy, my boy, show us your best waltz. Victoria will be your partner." Tommy's face burned. I've never learned to dance? How shocking." Victoria's lips curled in mock concern. "Perhaps we should start with something simpler. Can you at least bark like a dog?" More laughter, sharper now. Tommy's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He'd endured mockery before, but this was different. This was calculated, orchestrated cruelty masked as entertainment. "Come now, it's a simple request." Blake's voice hardened slightly. "Bark for us and you can have your pick of any dish on that table." Tommy looked at the feast he'd been promised, his empty stomach waging war with his pride. He opened his mouth, closed it again, shame burning in his throat. "I believe," James Wilson's quiet voice cut through the tense silence, "that young Tommy here has more dignity in his silence than some have shown in their demands." His eyes met Blake's, challenge clear in their depths. Blake's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Ah, James, always the defender of lost causes. But this isn't your courtroom, old friend. Here we play by different rules." He turned back to Tommy. "Since you refuse to entertain us with your voice, perhaps you'd prefer to demonstrate your balance? The view from my balcony is quite spectacular." A ripple of anticipation went through the crowd. Several guests moved toward the glass doors leading to the balcony, their excitement palpable. Tommy caught a glimpse of his reflection in the windows, a small, scared boy surrounded by wolves in evening wear. "Unless, of course," Blake added softly, "you'd prefer to leave? The elevator's right there. Though I must warn you, once you go, you'll never get another invitation like this. Think of the opportunities you'd be walking away from." Tommy looked at the elevator, then at the balcony, and finally at James Wilson, whose face showed a storm of emotions he couldn't quite read. In that moment he made a decision that would change everything. "What do you want me to do on the balcony?" Blake's smile turned predatory. "That's the spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we step outside to watch the real entertainment begin?" As the crowd moved toward the balcony doors, James Wilson's hand brushed Tommy's shoulder, the lightest touch, gone in an instant. But in that brief contact, Tommy felt something he hadn't expected, a promise. He just hoped he'd live long enough to find out what that promise meant. The winter wind whipped stronger at this height, making the balcony's glass panels vibrate. Tommy stood at the edge, looking down at the city lights swimming far below. Behind him, the party guests huddled near the warmth of the doors, champagne glasses clutched in manicured hands. "The task is simple," Blake announced, holding up a silver tray. "Carry this from one end of the balcony to the other. Don't spill a drop from the glasses." He paused for effect. "Of course, to make it interesting you'll need to walk on the ledge." The ledge, a decorative strip of concrete jutting out from the building's face, was barely wider than Tommy's feet. A gust of wind sent his borrowed shirt flapping, and someone in the crowd giggled nervously. "Richard," James Wilson stepped forward, authority ringing in his voice. "This goes beyond entertainment. It's perfectly safe," Blake cut him off smoothly. "The ledge is sturdy. Besides, our young friend here is sure-footed, aren't you, Tommy? All those years on the streets must have taught you something about balance." Tommy's mind flashed back to his sixth foster home, where he'd spent hours walking along the backyard fence, pretending he was a tightrope walker in a circus. Back then, falling meant scraped knees and wounded pride. Here it meant something else entirely. "What do I get if I make it?" Tommy asked, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. Blake's eyes glittered. $500. Gosh. Enough to keep you fed for quite a while, I'd imagine. "And if I refuse?" "Then you prove what everyone here already thinks, that you're nothing but a coward who belongs in the gutter." Tommy looked at the ledge again. $500. He could buy warm clothes, maybe even rent a room for a few nights. His feet moved before his brain could scream at them to stop. "Wait." James Wilson shrugged off his expensive coat and moved forward. "At least take this." The wind. "No helping." Victoria's sharp voice cut through the night air. "Let the boy earn his keep properly." Blake nodded in mock sympathy. "Rules are rules, James. Tommy must do this on his own." Tommy caught James's eye and saw something there. Recognition? Fear. Before he could process it, Blake thrust the silver tray into his hands. 3 champagne glasses stood on it, the liquid inside trembling with the wind. The first step onto the ledge nearly stopped his heart. The wind pulled at him, whispering promises of flight. Tommy forced himself to look straight ahead, not down. Never down. One step. Another. The glasses clinked softly against each other. Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's actually doing it." Halfway across, memories began to surface. His mother's face, fuzzy and indistinct. He'd been so young when she disappeared. A flash of someone else's face too, someone important, but it slipped away like smoke. 3/4 of the way there, the wind gusted hard. Tommy's shirt billowed like a sail. One of the glasses tipped dangerously, and he heard gasps from the crowd. With instincts born from years of surviving on scraps, he adjusted the tray microscopically, saving the glass. "Remarkable balance," he heard James murmur. "Just like his mother." The words hit Tommy harder than the wind. He stumbled slightly, his right foot slipping partly off the ledge. Several women screamed. Time seemed to stop as he teetered between sky and safety. In that frozen moment, Tommy saw James Wilson take an involuntary step forward, his face transformed by a fear too personal to be mere concern for a stranger. The expression triggered something in Tommy's memory: a summer day, a park, a man's strong hands lifting him toward the sun. Reality crashed back as Tommy found his balance. 2 more steps and he was back on solid ground, the glasses on the tray still full, his heart thundering in his chest. The crowd burst into applause, more mocking than appreciative. Blake took the tray, examining the glasses with exaggerated care. Well, he drawled. "It seems one of the glasses is missing a few drops. Must have splashed out during that near fall." He shook his head in feigned disappointment. "Not quite perfect, I'm afraid. But since you provided such excellent entertainment, I'll give you $50 instead of $500. Fair is fair." Tommy stood there, cold sweat drying on his skin as the truth sank in. There had never been a chance of winning. The game had been rigged from the start. But something else nagged at him now. James Wilson's words on the balcony, his reaction to Tommy's near fall, that half-remembered summer day, pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. As the party guests filed back inside, Tommy caught James watching him with eyes that held too many secrets. The old judge opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again as Blake called out, "Everyone inside. The night's entertainment is far from over." The party guests settled back into the penthouse, buzzing with excitement from the balcony scene. Tommy stood near a corner, still shaking slightly from the ordeal, the promised $50 burning in his pocket like a badge of shame. "That was quite a performance." Victoria sauntered over, her red dress catching the light. "Though I must say, watching you almost fall was the most entertaining part." She turned to the crowd. "Doesn't he remind you of a circus monkey? Performing for treats?" Several guests laughed, but James Wilson's voice cut through their amusement. "I seem to recall a time when your own family wasn't always so fortunate, Victoria. Before your marriage to Charles, wasn't your mother—" "That's quite enough reminiscing," Blake interrupted smoothly, but Tommy noticed Victoria's face had gone pale with rage. "We have more activities planned for our young guest." James moved closer to Tommy, his presence a subtle shield. "I think the boy has earned a break. Perhaps some food." "Food?" Blake's eyes gleamed. "But of course. Tommy, you must be famished after your acrobatics. Let's play a little game I call Earned Bites." The crowd shifted, forming a new circle. Servants appeared with covered platters, their faces carefully blank. "The rules are simple," Blake continued. "Answer our questions truthfully and you eat. Lie or refuse to answer and well." He shrugged elegantly. "Hunger is an excellent teacher, isn't it?" Tommy's stomach clenched, but not from hunger this time. He felt James tense beside him. "I'll start," Victoria said, her earlier humiliation making her voice sharp. "Tell us, little street rat, what happened to your parents. Did they abandon you or did they just not want you?" The question hit like a physical blow. Tommy's mind raced back to fragments of memories. A woman's gentle laugh, a man's strong hands, then nothing but a parade of foster homes and social workers with pitying eyes. Tommy's voice cracked. "I don't remember them clearly. My mother disappeared when I was 4. And my father disappeared too?" Blake's voice dripped false sympathy. "How convenient. Or perhaps they're in prison. Come now, surely you know something about them." James Wilson's hand gripped his chair so hard his knuckles went white. Tommy noticed a slight tremor in the old judge's shoulders. "My mother." Tommy closed his eyes, reaching for the memories. "She used to sing to me. Something about moonlight. And my father." His head hurt from straining to remember. "There was a park. He would lift me up toward the sun and pretend I was flying." A glass shattered. Everyone turned to see James Wilson standing rigid, the remains of his drink scattered at his feet. "James?" Blake's eyes narrowed. "Are you feeling unwell?" "That song," James's voice was barely audible. "Was it Moonlight Becomes You?" Tommy's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Because Sarah loved that song," James whispered, his face ashen. "Your mother. Sarah Wilson. She sang it every night while she rocked you to sleep." The room went deadly quiet. Blake's smile froze on his face. What are you saying?" Tommy's heart hammered against his ribs. James straightened to his full height, years of judicial authority evident in his bearing. "I'm saying, Tommy, that I know why you have perfect balance. You inherited it from your mother, a former dancer. I know why you remember being lifted toward the sun because I lifted you every Sunday at Crawford Park until—" His voice caught. "Until they threatened to kill you if I didn't give you up." Blake's mask of amusement cracked. "James, this is hardly the time." "This is exactly the time," James's voice thundered through the penthouse. "You wanted truth from him? Here's your truth. You've spent the evening tormenting a federal judge's son, a boy I was forced to surrender to protect him from a crime syndicate that was threatening my witnesses." Tommy's world tilted on its axis. Memories began to flood back. The park, the songs, a father's love abruptly replaced by stranger's care. "Dad." The word felt foreign on his tongue. James Wilson, his father, took a step toward him, tears streaming down his lined face. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I thought I was protecting you. I never imagined you'd end up on the streets. I've been searching for years, but they hid you so well, moving you through different foster homes." The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered frantically among themselves. Victoria backed away as if proximity to Tommy might now be dangerous. And Blake's face had transformed into something ugly and frightening. "How touching," Blake snarled. "The prodigal father returns. Tell me, James, does your son know why the syndicate was after you in the first place?" Or should I tell him about your own interesting past? The tension in the penthouse crackled like static before a lightning strike. Tommy stood frozen between his newly revealed father and Blake, whose sophisticated veneer had cracked to reveal something dark and vengeful beneath. You want to tell stories, James? Blake's voice carried an edge that made several guests edge toward the elevator. Let's tell your son how you really know about the syndicate. Not just as a judge but as someone who once. That case is sealed, James cut in sharply. And you know why. Sealed? Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like the records of a certain 4-year-old boy? Amazing how easily papers can disappear when the right palms are greased. How many strings did you pull, James, to hide your own son in the system? Tommy looked at his father, questions burning in his throat. James's face was a battlefield of grief and determination. I didn't hide him, James said quietly. I lost him. The syndicate had infiltrated the witness protection program. Every time I got close to finding Tommy, he would be moved to a new foster home. It took years to realize they were always one step ahead because they had people inside the system. And now here he is, Blake spread his arms wide, taking in the luxurious penthouse. A miracle reunion, courtesy of my little party. Though I must admit, I didn't expect the revelation quite so soon. I had more games planned. The way he said games made Tommy's skin crawl. Something clicked in his mind. You knew, he said. You knew who I was when you invited me. Blake's smile was all teeth. Give the boy a prize. Though technically Victoria found you. She has quite the network of informants. When she mentioned seeing a boy who looked remarkably like a young James Wilson digging through restaurant garbage, well? He shrugged. I couldn't resist the opportunity for a little social experiment. Experiment? James took a step forward, his judicial calm cracking. You subjected my son to public humiliation for an experiment? For justice? Blake spat the word like poison. Do you remember Judge Wilson's last case before his son's tragic disappearance? A certain racketeering charge against my father? You sentenced him to 30 years without parole, knowing what it would do to our family name, our business interests. Your father was guilty, James said firmly. The evidence was circumstantial at best. But you were determined to make an example of him. And now? Blake's smile returned, colder than ever. Now I've made an example of your son. How does it feel, James, watching someone you love being stripped of their dignity piece by piece? Tommy felt something shift inside him. All evening he'd been a puppet in Blake's game, dancing for scraps of food and dignity. But now, standing between his father and their mutual enemy, he found his voice. You're wrong, Tommy said, loud enough to halt the whispered conversations around them. You didn't strip away my dignity. You showed everyone here who really lacks it. Blake's face contorted. Brave words from a boy who was begging for food scraps an hour ago. Maybe, Tommy acknowledged. But I'd rather beg honestly than hurt people for entertainment. He turned to the gathered guests. How many of you enjoyed watching a 12-year-old boy risk his life on that ledge? What does that say about you? Several guests looked away, shame finally breaking through their wealthy insulation. Victoria's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. Enough. Blake's composure shattered completely. You think this changes anything? Your father ruined my family and now you've given me everything I need, James interrupted, pulling out his phone. This entire evening has been recorded. Every act of endangerment, every moment of coercion. The DA will be very interested, especially given your father's upcoming parole hearing. The color drained from Blake's face. You're bluffing. Am I? James's voice was steel. I spent 8 years unable to protect my son. Did you really think I'd walk into my enemy's lair without insurance? He turned to Tommy, his expression softening. I'm so sorry you had to endure this. But watching you stand up to him, seeing your strength, your mother would be so proud. Tommy felt tears burning his eyes. Is she gone? James said gently. 3 years after we lost you. She never stopped searching. Blake's laugh cut through the moment. How touching. But you're forgetting something, James. The syndicate isn't finished with you. Do you really think you can protect him this time? Actually, a new voice spoke from the elevator. I think that won't be a problem anymore. The elevator doors opened fully to reveal a tall woman in a dark suit, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Tommy noticed how several party guests suddenly seemed very interested in their phones, while others made discreet moves toward the emergency stairs. Assistant Director Sarah Chen, FBI, the woman announced, her badge glinting in the chandelier light. And Mr. Blake, we've been waiting a long time for this evening. Blake's face went through a rapid series of emotions, shock, anger, and finally, a desperate attempt at composure. I don't know what you think is happening here, but this is a private party. A private party where you attempted to coerce and endanger a minor? Chin raised an eyebrow. That's just the beginning. Judge Wilson has been working with us for months, helping to expose the connection between your investment firm and what remains of the syndicate. James placed a protective hand on Tommy's shoulder. When Victoria's network identified Tommy, they didn't realize they were doing us a favor. We've been trying to find proof of your organization's continuing criminal activities. Your obsession with revenge gave us exactly what we needed. The recording of tonight's events is just icing on the cake, Chin added. We already have everything. The money laundering through your charitable foundation, the witness intimidation, the corrupted foster care placements. She nodded to her agents. Mr. Blake, you're under arrest. As the agents moved forward, Blake's composure finally shattered completely. You self-righteous bastard, he snarled at James. You used your own son as bait. No, James's voice was firm. I've spent 8 years searching for my son. When we discovered your people had found him, I had a choice. Wait and risk losing him again or use your vendetta against me to finally end this. Tommy's strength tonight brought down something much bigger than just your party games. Victoria suddenly stepped forward, her red dress a splash of blood in the tense scene. I'd like to cooperate, she announced, ignoring Blake's look of betrayal. I have documentation about the network of informants within the foster care system. Of course you do, Blake laughed bitterly. The rats always desert a sinking ship. As the agents led Blake away, other law enforcement officers began to arrive, taking statements from increasingly cooperative party guests. Tommy stood in the midst of the chaos, trying to process everything that had happened. I know it's a lot to take in, James said softly. When Victoria's people reported finding you, I wanted to come immediately. But we knew Blake would run if I did, and all those other children in corrupted foster placements would remain at risk. Tommy looked up at his father, seeing the years of pain and determination etched in his face. You never stopped looking for me? Never. Your mother and I. James's voice caught. We searched everywhere. Sarah, your mother, she used to drive through different neighborhoods for hours hoping to catch a glimpse of you. When she got sick, she made me promise to keep looking. Assistant Director Chin approached them, her expression softening. We'll need statements from both of you, but it can wait until tomorrow. Judge, the protective detail is in place. You can take your son home. Home. The word hit Tommy like a physical force. Just hours ago he'd been digging through dumpsters and now? What happens next? He asked, suddenly uncertain. James knelt down to meet his eyes. Whatever you want, Tommy. I know I can't just walk back into your life and expect everything to be perfect. You've been through too much, grown up too fast. But if you're willing, I'd like a chance to be your father again. Tommy thought about all the foster homes, all the nights spent hungry and alone, all the times he tried to remember his parents' faces. The park, he said suddenly. Crawford Park, where you used to lift me up. It's still there, James smiled, tears in his eyes. The old plane-shaped jungle gym too, though it's a bit rusty now. Could we go there? Sometime? We can go anywhere you want, son. But first. James looked around the penthouse, where shell-shocked party guests were still giving statements to federal agents. First, let's get you a proper meal. No games, no challenges. Just a father and son having dinner. Tommy felt tears sliding down his face and didn't try to stop them. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows he could see the city lights sparkling below, the same lights he'd seen while walking the ledge. But now, instead of representing an uncrossable divide between his world and theirs, they looked almost like stars, full of possibility. I'd like that, he said. Dad. The next few days passed in a blur of statements, interviews, and paperwork. Tommy found himself in a comfortable room at the FBI field office, telling his story over and over to gentle-voiced agents who recorded every detail about the foster homes, the corrupted placements, and Blake's party of cruelty. You're doing great, Assistant Director Chin told him after one particularly long session. Your testimony is helping us identify dozens of other children who were intentionally lost in the system. Tommy sat in an oversized chair, a hot chocolate growing cold in his hands. Will they find their families too? Many of them, yes. Chen's expression softened. The syndicate's infiltration of the foster care system went deeper than we imagined. They didn't just hide you from your father. They used the system to control other witnesses' families too. The door opened and James walked in carrying a thick folder. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much, but he smiled warmly at Tommy. The DA's office is moving forward with charges against Blake and his associates, he announced. Victoria's cooperation opened up everything. She kept meticulous records, names, dates, payments. She was apparently planning her own insurance policy for years. Smart woman, Chin noted. Terrible person but smart. Tommy thought about Victoria in her red dress, orchestrating his discovery, setting up his humiliation. What'll happen to her? Reduced charges in exchange for her cooperation, James sighed. Sometimes justice requires complicated choices. Tommy understood complicated choices better than most 12-year-olds. Like using me as bait to catch Blake? James flinched. Tommy, It's okay, Tommy interrupted. I get it. Other kids needed help too. And he managed a small smile. It worked, didn't it? James crossed the room and knelt beside Tommy's chair. I need you to understand something. The moment we realized Blake had found you, I wanted to grab you off that street and never let go. The FBI had to convince me that waiting, letting events play out, would help more families. But watching you on that balcony? His voice cracked. I almost broke cover right then. If you had fallen. But I didn't, Tommy said firmly. Mom taught me balance, right? James's eyes filled with tears. She did. Sarah always said you could walk before you could run. Used to drive me crazy, finding you on top of furniture, fearless as a bird. Tommy took a sip of his now cold chocolate, processing everything. Tell me about her? About before? Chin quietly slipped out of the room as James pulled up a chair. She was a dancer with the Boston Ballet when we met. I was a young prosecutor, always rushing around with a coffee in hand. One day, I literally ran into her outside the courthouse. He smiled at the memory. She spilled her tea all over my case files and spent an hour helping me reorganize them. Tommy leaned forward, drinking in every detail. What else? She loved thunderstorms. Said they were nature's standing ovation. When you were little, she'd wrap you in blankets and sit by the window, counting seconds between lightning and thunder, teaching you not to be afraid. A fragment of memory stirred, warm blankets, his mother's heartbeat, the rumble of thunder making the windows shake. After they took me, Tommy hesitated. What happened? James's face darkened. We searched everywhere. Filed reports, hired private investigators. Sarah never gave up. Even when she got sick, she'd check every foster home listing, every school enrollment. He took a shaky breath. She made me promise to keep looking. Her last words were your name. Tommy felt tears sliding down his face. James reached out tentatively, and this time, Tommy didn't hesitate. He fell into his father's embrace, letting out 8 years of loneliness and loss. After a while, James pulled back slightly. There's something else you should know. Your mother? She left something for you. A trust fund and letters. One for each birthday we missed. I've kept them safe waiting. Can I? Tommy's voice cracked. Can I read them? Of course. They're at home, you're home now if you want it to be. Home. The word still felt strange, dangerous to hope for. What about the syndicate? Blake said they weren't finished. Blake was wrong, James said firmly. The FBI operation didn't just expose his organization. It reached all the way to the top. The old power structure is gone. You're safe now, Tommy. We both are. Tommy nodded, but a lifetime of uncertainty made him ask, Promise? James looked him in the eye. I promise. And I promise I'll never let you go again. Through the office window, Tommy could see the Boston skyline, the same view he'd seen from Blake's penthouse. But now, instead of representing a world of cruelty and exclusion, it looked like something else. A beginning. 2 weeks after Blake's party, Tommy stood in front of a colonial-style house in Brookline, his few possessions in a small backpack. The front yard was well kept, with late autumn flowers still blooming in wooden boxes beneath the windows. It looked like the kind of home he'd walked past countless times, wondering what life was like inside. Ready? James asked, keys jingling in his hand. Tommy nodded, though his heart was racing. The front door opened to reveal hardwood floors and walls lined with photographs. He stopped at one that showed a beautiful woman in a dance pose, her smile radiant. Mom, he whispered. That was from her last performance, James said softly. Swan Lake. She was magnificent. Tommy moved through the house slowly, taking everything in. The kitchen was warm and lived in, with a refrigerator covered in magnets from different cities, places they'd searched for him, he realized. In the living room, a pile of case files shared space with newspapers reporting Blake's arrest. Your room is upstairs, James said. I kept it ready. All these years. Tommy climbed the stairs, his hand trailing along the banister. The second door on the right stood slightly ajar. Inside he found a room frozen in time, model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, children's books on shelves, and a twin bed with a faded rocket ship comforter. "We can change everything," James said quickly. "Make it more suitable for—" "No," Tommy interrupted. "It's perfect." On the desk sat a stack of envelopes, each one labeled with a birthday date. 8 letters from his mother, waiting all these years. Tommy picked up the first one with trembling hands. "I'll give you some privacy." James turned to leave. "Stay," Tommy said. "Please." Together, they sat on the rocket ship bedspread as Tommy opened the first letter. His mother's handwriting was elegant, each word filled with love and hope. "My dearest Tommy, today you would be 5. I wonder if you still love airplane shapes in your sandwich crusts, if you still try to catch raindrops on your tongue. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're loved. But most of all, I hope you remember that you are our miracle, our brave boy who could walk on fences and dance in thunderstorms." Tommy read through tears, his father's arm around his shoulders. Each letter revealed another piece of the mother he'd lost, the life he should have had. The last one, written from her hospital bed, contained a final promise. "Your father will find you, my darling. And when he does, remember that every day we couldn't hold you, we carried you in our hearts." A knock at the bedroom door made them both look up. Assistant Director Chin stood there, looking slightly apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's something you both need to know. We've finished processing Victoria's records. Tommy, you weren't the only child at that party with a hidden story. 3 other guests. They were children of witnesses too. Blake was playing a longer game than we realized." James straightened. "Are their families being notified now?" Chin managed a small smile. "You started a chain reaction, Tommy. More families are being reunited every day." Tommy thought about the other kids still out there waiting to find their way home. "Can I help? Maybe talk to them, let them know it gets better?" Chin and James exchanged a look of pride. "Actually," Chin said, "we were hoping you might be willing to do exactly that. When you're ready." Tommy nodded, feeling something settle in his chest. A sense of purpose, maybe, or the understanding that his story didn't end with coming home. It was just beginning. "But first," James said, gathering the letters carefully, "I think it's time for dinner. Your mother's recipes are in the kitchen. She always said food tastes better when it's cooked with love." As they headed downstairs, Tommy paused at the family photos. "Dad? Could you tell me more about her? About everything?" James smiled, his eyes bright with tears and joy. "Of course. We have all the time in the world now." Outside, the Boston evening was settling in, streetlights flickering to life like stars. Through the window, Tommy could see his reflection overlapping with the family photos, past and present, loss and love, all coming together in this place that was finally truly home. 3 months later, Tommy stood at the entrance to Crawford Park. The winter had softened into early spring, and buds were just beginning to appear on the trees. The old plane-shaped jungle gym stood exactly where his father had described it, its metal frame catching the morning sun. "Ready?" James asked, standing beside him. Tommy nodded. They weren't alone. Assistant Director Chen was there with a camera crew from the FBI's Public Outreach Department. Today would be Tommy's first official speech as part of their new program for reuniting families affected by witness intimidation. A small crowd had gathered near the playground equipment. Social workers, FBI agents, and most importantly, children and parents in various stages of reunion. Tommy recognized some faces from the files he'd helped review, stories that paralleled his own. As he approached the microphone, Tommy caught sight of a familiar flash of red. Victoria stood at the back of the crowd, now wearing an ankle monitor with her designer clothes. Part of her plea deal included helping with these reunions. Their eyes met briefly and she gave him a small nod, not quite an apology but an acknowledgement. "My story began in this park," Tommy started, his voice clear in the morning air. "Right there, on that jungle gym where my father used to lift me toward the sun. 8 years ago I lost that life. I lost my family, my identity, and almost lost hope." He paused, looking at the gathered faces. "But that's not where the story ends. 3 months ago, at what should have been my lowest moment, I discovered something important. Sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. And we're never really alone even when it feels that way." In the crowd, a young girl clutched her mother's hand. They'd been reunited just last week, another success story from Victoria's files. "Today this park represents something new. Not just my memories but a promise to all of you who are still searching, still hoping. We're here to help you find your way home, to rebuild what was taken, to prove that love and truth are stronger than fear and lies. James watched from the side, pride shining in his eyes. On his tablet, he held the latest case statistics. 37 families reunited so far, dozens more in process. Blake's network had been vast, but its collapse was proving even more far-reaching. It won't be easy, Tommy continued. Coming home never is. There will be hard days, confusing days, days when the past feels too heavy to carry. But look around. Every person here understands. You're not alone anymore. He gestured to the jungle gym. That old plane taught me about balance, about reaching for the sky even when my feet were on the ground. Today it reminds me that while we can't change the past, we can choose how we move forward. And we can choose to move forward together. After the speech, as families mingled and shared stories, Tommy and James walked to the jungle gym. Without a word, James interlocked his fingers to make a step. Tommy placed his foot in his father's hands and felt himself being lifted, just like in his childhood memories. For a moment he was flying again, suspended between past and present, loss and recovery. Below him he could see the whole park, full of people finding their way back to each other. The morning sun caught the tears on his face, turning them to gold. "Thank you," he whispered, not just to his father but to everything that had brought him to this moment, even the hard parts, even the pain. It had all led him here, to this new beginning. James lowered him gently back to earth and pulled him into a hug. A breeze rustled through the budding trees, carrying the promise of spring, of renewal, of hope taking root and growing strong. In his pocket, Tommy carried his mother's last letter, its words now memorized. Every ending is just another way to begin again. Every storm carries its own kind of grace. And love, my darling boy, love always finds its way home. Looking around at the families in the park, some laughing, some crying, all healing, Tommy knew she had been right. They had all found their way home, each in their own time, each carrying their own storms and grace. And somewhere, he thought, his mother was watching, counting thunder like applause, dancing in the light of new beginnings. The end.